Hello.
Hey.
Hello, everyone. Hi. I'm in Ireland. I wish. Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of Writers to Watch. I'm Virginia Stanley,
I'm Lainey Mays.
And I'm Grace Caternolo.
and we're the Library Marketing Department at HarperCollins, coming to you from various ports in the storm. Boy, is it raining out tonight. And we have four stellar authors with us tonight. What a lineup. We are so excited to speak with Kate Quinn, Lucy Foley, David Nicholls, and Rufi Thorpe. This is sit back and get ready because these books have blown our hair back, and we just love these authors so much and cannot wait to hear from them. So, Lainey, Grace, do we want to say anything before we bring on author number one? Do we have housekeeping things to talk about?
I don't think so at the beginning, but I'm glad everyone's here. I'd like to say that.
Yesterday was National Snack Day.
It was fun.
Grace looks like I lost out on that. I didn't know.
No, I didn't know. No one filled me in. There was no memo, nothing.
Can I say one thing about our videos we did this month?
Please do.
So we did something fun this month. We made videos for every book that we're gonna talk about tonight. And you can always go check those out on our Instagram, on Reels, or Facebook has them, and our TikTok. And you can go check that out. But I don't know, it was just something kind of fun and got us excited. And I don't know, so maybe we'll continue doing that and it'll get everybody excited for the next one. But please go watch it if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, that was super fun. And we'll do some wrap ups at the end. We have two authors who are coming to us from over the pond, so we're going to stop as close to 8 as humanly possible. But please have questions and comments ready because each author will talk about their book for just a few minutes, and then we will bring everybody on. And the whole core of this program is to have conversation among each other and with you. So bring your questions, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. So we're going to bring out Rufi Thorpe first. So Lainey, I believe you're introducing Rufi. So
Yes.
bye, everyone.
Hi, Rufi. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. I'm so excited you're here to talk about Margot's Got Money Troubles. How are you doing? How's everything?
Oh, I'm doing amazing. I'm so happy to be here. It's so cool to get to be part of an event that wouldn't get to happen in real life because you have people coming from all over. It's sort of magic.
Yeah, for sure. That's true. I mean, it is seen by our crazy time difference here, but yeah, it's super fun. Well, I'm gonna do a quick bio and then I'm gonna hand it over to you to tell us more about your new book. So, Rufi Thorpe is the author of The Knockout Queen, a finalist for the Penn Faulkner Award, Dear Fang with Love, and The Girls from Corona Del Mar, and which was longlisted for the International Dylan Thomas Prize and the Flannery Dunnan First Novel Prize. A native of California, she currently lives in LA with her husband and two sons. And Margot's Got Money Troubles comes out in June, and I find it very hard to talk about this book because I loved it so much. So I'm gonna hand it to you to tell them what they need to know, and I will maybe at the end read a few of your great quotes that you're getting in. So tell us about Margot's Got Money Troubles.
Sure. Well, so Margot's Got Money Troubles is about Margot, a community college student who has an affair with her professor and gets knocked up and decides to keep the baby and winds up supporting herself with an OnlyFans account. Her dad is an ex-pro wrestler fresh out of rehab who asks if he can move in with her and help out with childcare. And it's actually his sort of wisdom from the world of wrestling that helps her account take off, which is, of course, when all of the real trouble begins. And I really wrote it. The seed of this book for me came from a really abstract place, which is that it was after seeing the movie Wonder Woman. I was like, why she gotta be so perfect and virginal though? And I was like, what if you could make a female superhero who was like a Madonna whore? Like, what if you could take motherhood and whoredom and fuse them to make like a superhero? And I was like, it's impossible. I'll never be able to do it. The cultural stigmas against sex work are so strong, and people venerate motherhood in this irrational way. Like, it would be impossible. But then at the beginning of the pandemic, OnlyFans was really exploding in terms of its usership. And I noticed that people were talking about it in a really different way. I think in part like the staggering amount of money that you can make, suddenly people's like moral objections, and also because it's not happening in person, it just felt like much more of a gray area for people. And I was like, this is my chance. This is my chance to tell this story. And at the same time, my kids were obsessed with wrestling, and that's sort of how pro wrestling came into it. And I got obsessed with wrestling. And so I think this book really comes from my fandom of like content creators and sort of what's happening online, not just OnlyFans, but on TikTok, you know, on YouTube, and then pro wrestling. And in that way, it kind of winds up, the book has some sort of meta elements and is kind of a meditation on art making. Like one of the rejected titles when we were going through titles was Portrait of the Artist as a Young Sex Worker. And so it does very much like have that, you know, meditation on what it is to make art.
It was so your editor, Jessica Williams, walked by us at Virginia. I were in the cafe talking one day at Harper, and we were talking about this book, and I think we all were like, oh, this is probably the only time we're just going to casually be talking about OnlyFans to our colleagues in this cafe. Like it was an odd moment, but it is so true. It's everywhere. I'm on TikTok all the time. I see it, and it's really become destigmatized in some ways. But yeah, this read, I mean, I never knew what was going to happen next. I thought it was just so smart and so funny and sweet. I loved her dad and her story. Like that was beautiful, and just a mother's love. It was great. And you've already got a Kirkus starred review, which is amazing. And I just want to read this Kevin Wilson quote. We love Kevin, and his quote is on the cover. It says, "Margot's Got Money Troubles is an audacious, wildly funny, completely unpredictable novel by a writer so singular that it's hard to compare to anyone else." I thought, like, I think it's true. It's just a wild ride of so much packed into this read. But I don't know, just congratulations. I wish I could read it again for the first time. Yeah. Okay, well, we're gonna hand it over to our next author.
So next we have Lucy Foley. So Lucy,
hello.
Lucy, hello, how are you?
Great. I have to say, Rufi's book sounds amazing. I want an ARC. Can I beg an ARC? It just sounds so up my street. One of my favorite TV programs was Glow, and I'm so sad that it finished. But it just sounds like so many things that I love. So yes, please. Putting my hand
We
up
will
here.
definitely get that to you, Lucy, promise. And Rufi has an amazing website, and it's true. When we were, what Lainey said, when we were hanging out in the cafe at Harper, and then she came by and we just started talking about this book, and it's just super fun. And we just go to Rufi's website. I'm glad you're intrigued by this book. So now let's talk about your book. A brief introduction, Lucy Foley. So Lucy Foley studied English literature at Durham University and University College London, and worked for several years as a fiction editor in the publishing industry. She's the author of 5 novels, including The Paris Apartment, The Guest List, and The Hunting Party. The Guest List was a Reese Witherspoon book club pick. The Paris Apartment was a Marie Claire book club. Both books were book of the month clubs. I mean, you can't swing a cat and find great raves and about your books, because they are wonderful and your fan base is huge. Lucy's forthcoming book, The Midnight Feast, which goes on sale June 18th, is this twisty locked room mystery. It's perfect for fans of the White Lotus. It's the luxury summer vacation most of us can't afford. Beautifully appointed cabins with high-end beauty products, a welcome party with a signature cocktail, a long and expensive spa menu. It'd all be so lovely if it wasn't so murderous. Lucy, take it away. Tell folks what you want them to know about your book.
I will. First of all, I had such evil fun writing this book. I'm sort of sad to, I'm just doing the proofs right now, and I'm kind of sad to let it go because I feel like I want to add in even more atmosphere, more darkness, and because I just got so into the world of this book. So it's set, yeah, as you say, at the opening weekend of the Manor, which is this new kind of luxury countryside resort. But it's built on old secrets beside an ancient wood. And the owner of this hotel, Francesca Meadows, who used to actually come and sort of summer at the house when it was her grandparents' house, has really kicked the hornet's nest. And we've got some very angry local people on our hands. It's a sort of locals versus they're coming down from city dwellers. It's a sort of, I pitched it to my editor as kind of tractors versus SUVs. Anyway, so it's all set over this opening weekend, which also coincides with the summer solstice and an impending heat wave. So as the temperatures rise, tensions rise, and we've also got some unexpected guests who have come to stay, and secrets from the past coming home to roost. And it's also about a kind of monetized, cynical wellness. Think sort of CBD infused cocktails, sage sticks, kind of bespoke crystals, versus this kind of ancient pagan spirituality that comes from the land. It's set in the West Country in the UK, and the West Country, you may have heard of Stonehenge, a little place called Stonehenge. There's Glastonbury Tor, there's sort of Arthurian legends nearby. So there's this sort of wonderful kind of ancient history that I was able to draw on, and also this real kind of pagan Wicker Man-esque stuff. So it's definitely got some kind of themes that quite kind of folk horror adjacent, I would say. It's not folk horror, but it definitely dips its toe in those waters. And I had a lot of fun playing with that. And we have this sort of, I don't know what you would call them, a kind of fairly sinister local force called the Birds. I don't want to spoiler anything too much because I think part of the fun is sort of is getting to meet them or getting to glimpse them in the shadows. But they, in centuries past, would kind of enforce justice on behalf of the local community. So if someone had gone against the wishes of the local community, or someone had contravened the peace, they would set fire to their crops, kill their pigs, all sorts of kind of dark and nasty stuff, but it felt justified for them. So I suppose the twist is they may still be hanging around in 2025 when the book is set. And Francesca Meadows has really pissed the local people off. So there we go. What else to say about it? I suppose the thing I really wanted to do with this book is sort of push the satire a little bit as well, like have some real fun with, it's got some really dark stuff going on. It's got some, I think, very emotional stuff. Certainly in terms of the kind of local community and family and people who have been really hurt by this place, but also hurt by the modern world and just feeling left behind. So I wanted that hopefully to feel very authentic and kind of emotionally stirring, but also bring in the humor and bring in the fun. And it all just kind of ends in this, well, I won't spoiler anything, but there's sort of fireworks and just desserts and hopefully a character in Francesca Meadows that you really love to hate. I love to hate her and I love to write her, but hopefully she's good fun. Anyway, there we go.
Oh my God, you just took the words right out of my mouth because I love her. I love Francesca. She's just so perfect. I mean, she's just so great. And crazy things she says, and this whole, sort of veneer which she puts on to the outside world. It's great. I completely understand what you're saying because there's right from the get-go, that there's you start with the birds, you start with what's going on here. It's got an ominous sort of feeling, and then kind of like the audacity of it all, like the craziness and the just the over the top of it all. And she's so over the top. I don't know when I've ever read a character like that, which I can't get enough of her because she's so ridiculous. She's great. Thank you for making her.
Thank you so much.
Oh boy. Yeah. Well, that's cool. There's a whole lot going on here. So it's more to talk about. So but that was great. That was just perfect setup for the midnight feast. So we will put you into the virtual green room, which just means you turn off your camera, and then Kate comes on.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you here.
Hi, Kate. Oh my God, thank you for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you about the BRIAR Club, which has one of the prettiest jackets I've ever seen. And I was gonna hold up my galley, but you can see it much better on the screen. It is stunning, and I'm really excited. Your editor gave us a little hint that the actual final cover is going to be very, very shiny and pretty. So I'm very excited for people to hold it. And I'm really pumped to talk to you about this. You are a librarian favorite. You're a Library Reads Hall of Famer, and I'm going to read a little bit about you before you tell us about the BRIAR Club, which is on sale this July. So Kate Quinn is the New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of historical fiction, a native of Southern California. She attended Boston University, where she earned a bachelor's and master's degree in classical voice. A lifelong history buff, she has written 4 novels in the Empress of Rome saga and 2 books set in the Italian Renaissance before turning to the 20th century with The Alice Network, The Huntress, The Rose Code, and The Diamond Eye. All have been translated into multiple languages. She and her husband now live in California with their 3 black rescue dogs. And I just wanted to give a call back to a Library Journal starred review for The Diamond Eye, which said, each one of her books exceeds expectations set by the previous title, and she has done it again with this one. This is such a fantastic book. I was hooked on it, and I know readers will be too. You're old fans, and you're going to make so many new fans with this one, and I will stop my yapping and let you tell everyone about the BRIAR Club.
Well, thank you for that lovely intro. And I really don't feel like I can, say anything to top what Lucy and Rufi have said before me. I can't wait to read your books, ladies. But in any case, the BRIAR Club begins on page 1 with a corpse. It is Thanksgiving of 1954, and we've all known a holiday that probably a Thanksgiving in that case, where we have felt that like blood might hit the walls before the end of the night if people are not careful. Well, in Thanksgiving of 1954 in the Briarwood house, boarding house, it has happened. There's a corpse on the floor. The police are here, and it's a question of who's the corpse and who was responsible for it. And the book then flashes back to 4 years previously when you see a new boarder arrive at the Briarwood house, which is a sort of shabby, genteel boarding house for ladies. And the book does touch back periodically onto the murder, but what it really does is tell the story sequentially of each of the different ladies who happens to live there. There is the one boy who is the son of the landlady, who is 13 years old and, desperately nurturing a crush on a couple of the women in the house, but also struggling with the fact that being a kid in the dawning nuclear age is not always as white picket fence awesome as it's supposed to be. We have Nora, a policeman's daughter, who is now working for the National Archives and who is getting tangled up, despite herself, with organized crime in Washington, D.C. We have Reka, who is he was a refugee from Hitler's Berlin back in the late 30s, and who is still harboring a nearly lethal grudge from that time, and which is finally going to come to fruition. We have a young English army wife whose husband has been gone in the Korean War for 2 years and who is barely keeping herself and her daughter together without cracking. We have a woman who is an injured baseball star from the short-lived American Women's Baseball Leagues. Remember, A League of Their Own, that she's being forced to think about hanging up her cleats for good. We've got a woman who works for the only senator in the Senate or in Congress who was a woman named Margaret Chase Smith, and he was the only one who had the guts to stand up to McCarthy when he was starting his reign of terror. We have a woman who has thrown herself heart and soul into the HUAC and the Red Scare. And then we have Grace. Grace is the widow who comes to the Briarwood house in the very opening pages. And Grace has a gift. She has a gift for pulling people together. She starts a weekly supper club where everybody, her neighbors, stop being strangers and start becoming friends because of this. And she has a secret of her own, but you're not going to find that out till the end. And of course, periodically, you're going to be left wondering just who did get killed, and more importantly, who did the killing. This book really grew for me out of a deep desire after the pandemic for family and for friends, and for that urge to gather around a table and feed people, and to be sitting there with conversation and laughter and good wine and sometimes really crappy wine. It didn't matter, as long as there are people you love together around a table, and scraped plates and laughter happening and jokes happening. And for so long we didn't have that. And this book was my way of giving myself that in the time just after the pandemic and the lockdown. And so it's about found family. It's about the 1950s, not the serene white picket fence version that we think of, but all the things that are left over and roiling from the 1940s, and all the things that are burgeoning and roiling for the upcoming 60s. It's a very much more interesting time period than you might think. And my ladies are neck deep in it in every possible angle, and I can't wait for you to meet them all. And the other thing, which is, I think, important in this book, is that technically, yes, there are 8 points of view, because you go between each of the women sequentially to learn their story. But the 9th point of view is the house itself. You actually get the point of view of the house, which has is somewhat sentient and very much has a running commentary as the police investigation goes on. And the house itself is very vested in what is going to happen to the women it considers its family. So that's the BRIAR Club, and I can't wait for you guys to read it once it hits shelves on July 9th.
Thank you so much. I love hearing you talk about, having it come out of this time where we were very isolated, because if you do one thing, it is write a great cast of characters and their connections. And I think that need for connection that we all felt comes across on this page. Without it being a pandemic book, I would never have, thought of that. So thank you so much, Kate. And we are gonna pass it back to Virginia.
All right. Thank you, Kate. That was awesome. Just so many good books. So many good books. And now we're talking about another great book. David Nicholls' book, You Are Here. David, are you here?
Hi,
Yes,
everyone.
you are.
I
Hi.
am. I hope so. Yes. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, I
Hello,
can.
everyone.
It's so nice to have
Hi.
you here again, David, and author number 2 from across the pond. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight to talk about your book. So many times people say, authors say, this is the first time I've spoken about this book, and that's what you just said to me.
It is. Yes. 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 This is all new to me, and it's very exciting to hear everyone else's books and to stay
Well,
up so late. I haven't been up this late for a long time.
well, yeah,
For
David
30
said that we
years.
should make we should make Writers to Watch do it at midnight, and then we can just make it look like a really cool hipster club that you have to have a secret password to get in. Okay, I'll stop. I'm going to do a brief intro, and then I'm going to ask you to talk about You Are Here. So David
Sure.
Nicholls is the best-selling author of Starter for 10, The Understudy, One Day, Us, which was longlisted for the Booker Prize for Fiction and a Library Reads pick when it was published back in 2014. I was thrilled when that happened because I just fell in love with that book. It's such a wonderful read. Your other books, Sweet Sorrow, and Now You Are Here. He's also a screenwriter who's written adaptations of Far from the Madding Crowd, When Did You Last See Your Father, and Great Expectations, as well as his own novels, Starter for 10, One Day, and Us. His adaptation of Edward St. Aubyn's Patrick Melrose, starring Benedict Cumberbatch, was nominated for an Emmy and won him a BAFTA for Best Writer. David is also the executive producer and contributing screenwriter on the new Netflix adaptation of One Day, and congratulations on that. His forthcoming novel, You Are Here, is an uplifting and unputdownable love story about second chances. David Nicholls himself calls this his funniest book yet. It's bittersweet and hopeful stories of first encounters, second chances, and finding the way home. I love this book. tell us more about it, David, please.
Oh, thank you. Yes. So You Are Here. It is a love story. It's a love story that takes place on a long walk. There's a famous walk in the UK called the Coast to Coast that goes from Cumbria, St. Bees in Cumbria, all the way to Robin Hood's Bay in Yorkshire. And You Are Here is about two lonely people who meet on this walk. Marnie is a copy editor who's been living alone in London for a while, and she's got a little stuck. She's not quite sure what she's doing with her life. She lives a very solitary life, and she's bullied really by a friend into going for a weekend's walking in the Lake District, where she meets amongst a group of people Michael. Michael is a geography teacher. He's recently separated from his wife, who he still very much loves, and he's determined to walk the whole width of the country from west to east. It's 190 miles. He's going to do it over 10 days. As the walking weekend goes on, a connection forms between Michael and Marnie, and eventually, for various reasons, the other walkers fall away until it's just the two of them. And that's the love story. It's a love story that takes place in this magnificent landscape, but the novel itself is very intimate. It's very close up. It's very conversational. It's two people getting to know each other. I really love the idea that the stages of the walk corresponded to the different stages of the relationship. So to begin with, there's sort of indifference, and then a certain amount of hostility on day 2, and then a tentative forgiveness on day 3, and then friendship on day 4, and so on and so forth. And I love the idea too that the landscape provided a structure for the walk. You know, when you go on a long hike, each day has its own particular quality. You have bad days, and days where all you do is laugh and talk all day, and days where you feel a little more uncertain of what's happening, or days where you just spend the whole day soaked to the skin, having a horrible time. I wanted to build the landscape into the story. The Coast to Coast walk itself has sort of 3 acts. The lakes, the Lake District in Cumbria, which is very beautiful, very mountainous, very eventful. Then the Dales, the Yorkshire Dales, which is a rather softer landscape, and then the moors, which, you know, famously is rather bleak and challenging, which is kind of the 3rd act of the novel. It's a romantic comedy in lots of ways, but their conversation takes them into some darker places, stories from their past as they open up to each other. And this one was a real joy to write. I don't really do much research, but I've always gone on these long walks. For the last 10 years, I've been going on a long walk by myself once a year, 4 or 5 days in the English countryside, usually in the north of England. And I was talking to a friend about this, and they said, why not write a non-fiction book about what walking means to you, about the experience of spending that time by yourself. And it's a very precious time for me, but I felt that maybe it would be better to write a novel, to put two people who in lots of ways are determined to spend time by themselves, to put them together and to force them to get to know each other and see what happens. So it's funny, it's poignant, it's sad. I hope it has a kind of addictive quality. I hope that people are going to read it and think, just one more day, another 20 miles. And I'm really proud of this one. It was a real joy to write. I really love Marnie, I really love Michael, and I love hearing them bounce off each other.
Well, it is addictive. And I'm not just saying this because we're doing this show right now. I mean, there's really no good place to stop reading it. And I love that, I love that you did it this way. They're so different, but it feels like the thing that's their common denominator, I guess, is that they're wounded, and so
Yeah.
it's and there's just but it's also so funny. And when you talk about the conversations that they have, they're so spot on. I mean, sometimes she just gets so pissed at him, it's just really funny, and she doesn't hold back because she's just angry, and she just wants to be inside. Great. It's just such a wonderful just watching them sort of unravel and then deal with each other. And I don't want to ruin anything because the joy is in the reading. Let me tell you something, it's joy. I did mean to read this quote from Matt Haig, who's the #1 New York Times bestselling author of the Midnight Library. He said, "The genius who gave us One Day has written another classic and funny love story set on a 10-day hike. You breeze along and get caught up in it like a leaf in the wind, witty and joyous." I love that.
That's
There's so
very
many
nice.
quotes,
That's
but
very
I
kind.
love that quote.
Yeah, that's very kind of Matt. I mean, yeah, it does have its roots in classic romantic comedy, really. It's an odd couple love story. But it goes into some quite dark areas as well, and I hope there's some poignancy and some emotion in there as well. Like One Day, it's a mixture of big comic set pieces and stuff that's more tender and touching and close up. Even though it all takes place against this extraordinary, beautiful background. I did the walk myself as research in 3 stages, and it's a magnificent walk, but it also has moments of melancholy and sadness as well. So I hope all of that is on the page.
It is. I mean, there's so much to unpack. They have so much. They bring so much,
Yeah.
and it is. I mean, it's not all one thing, for sure. And there's lots of reasons that you find out why they are the way they are. And
Yeah.
but it's just an absolutely wonderful read. Thank you so much for
Thank
writing.
you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
So let's bring all the authors on now so we can have a little round robin chat. Hi, everyone. Hi, Rufi. Hi, Lucy.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Kate. This is great. This is just what we want. Give everybody a little bit of a taste of these books, and then we just sort of open it to conversation with ourselves and with people who are watching. And if there's anything that you all want to say to each other or ask questions, that's all good. So we'll start with Grace and Lainey, and you have questions from of your own, from attendees. What's going on?
We're getting a lot of great comments. Everyone's super excited. Yeah, I think everyone at the beginning was just like, "I'm so happy to be here," which is exciting, and we've like seen all the hearts go up the whole time, which is super fun.
Can I just add that while everybody else was talking, I was digging back through the email chain about this event and finding the one that had all of your PDFs and docs of your things on there, and hitting download to go straight to my Kindle. So I know what I'm reading tonight. One of yours. I'm just not sure which yet, because they all sound wonderful.
I love that. Well, there you go, everyone. That's there you go. I don't have to say anything else. Download too. That's really great. Thank you. There was a question for everyone. Let me find it. I thought it was kind of a fun question. Oh, from Janelyn. And maybe this will get the conversation going about other things I don't know, but this says, "How does each author celebrate after finishing a book?" And I thought that was a really great question. So.
Oh, shall I? This is so interesting to me because I always imagined for movies that you poured a fine wine and smoked a cigar and sent it away, and that was it, and you tell everyone you celebrate, and then you realize, of course, that you do that about 6 or 7 times, and I've constantly been telling my family I've finished. And by the 4th or 5th time, they're very bored. They're kind of thinking, "Hang on a second. Do you mean you finished the first draft, or the second draft, or the third draft, or the copy edit, or the proofread?" So by the 6th or 7th stage, they're very blasé about the whole thing. And the first draft, I mean, feels so far away from being finished. It's just a kind of a vehicle for discussion, really. It's the beginning of a process rather than the end. So I guess when is the landmark? Is it when you get your first, advanced reading copy, or when you finally hold the finished thing? I don't know. I don't know when everyone else feels that that's it, it's done.
I feel like I feel that one should cover all the bases by having bubbly be involved in all of the I'm done stages, whether it is
Yeah.
I'm done with the draft, I'm done with the first round of edits, the second round, the copy editing, the first pass pages, or as just happened with the BRIAR Club, I sent in the very last answers to the very last queries while I was on tour for something else, and I could barely remember what the book was even about. They were all landmarks deserving of bubbly.
Yeah.
So I finished, I would say, the final draft at about 3 in the morning. So I always like to pull an all-nighter because it just feels right that, you know, you should, or a nearly all-nighter. That is definitely an all-nighter for me. So I finished it about 3 in the morning, and then my husband that day he was on parental leave at the time, shared parental leave, looking after our 8-month-old and 3-year-old. And then he suddenly revealed the day that I was finishing it that he had an interview the next day in London. So I got handed both babies, I think 7 the next morning. And we went to a farm. But it was great fun. You know, completely different from writing, but it definitely wasn't glamour. So I think at some point I do need to have that fancy dinner and the champagne. Felt quite real.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's true. There's so many, when you like finish a draft, it hardly ever do you get that feeling of like, oh, it's completely done. But I definitely do. Like with this one, I can remember being like, I finished this draft. And so I like bought a Diet Coke and hot Cheetos. That was so maybe it's like, those are the small bubbles. I don't know.
Do you type the end? I don't even type the end. I it feels too stagey to me now. It feels.
I don't type the end, but I put a pound symbol. Why?
Oh,
I don't know.
that.
It doesn't make any sense.
I love that. That's great.
Sign off.
I do type the end, but it is performative. It's sort of like to tell myself, okay, I'm done. It's also something to take a picture for social media, because there is so little about my life that feels like it's in any way worthy of being commemorated on social media, but a nice shot of the end actually feels pretty good. But yeah, you're aware even when you're typing it though. This is not actually the end.
I love that.
I have one question. So we're going to ask questions as they come in, and there are comments as well. And again, please, we love that you're all talking to each other. I think that's super fun. Oh my God, there's so many questions. There's stuff going on here. Let's see. Kimberly McGee says, it feels like the pandemic and lockdown influenced many of these books. Did all of your ideas come from the pandemic years? Anybody want to take that? Start with it?
I know this one did for me. I proposed it to my agent like mid 2021. So it was like, you know, we were coming out of lockdown, but you know, there was vaccinations, but it was still very far from being open. And it felt like a big deal because she was actually over at my house, and like there was lunch, and it was happening on the back deck, and it felt so amazing and a little strange to be actually doing something social at the same time as it's also, you know, a work visit. But I was proposing it at that point, and this book did come out of my whole desire to feed people and to wish to have friends around a table. And it was the things that I was missing about, you know, that lack of connection that we had. So this book definitely came out of, you know, sort of the lockdown for me, and thematically in a certain number of ways. And I actually kind of wondered in general, and I've talked about it with other writer friends, I'd be curious to see what you three think. I think all writers I know have what they call a pandemic book. It was whatever we were pouring the tension, the loneliness, the darkness into while we were in the middle of everything. But I honestly kind of wonder if there's also such a thing as a post-pandemic book, you know, something that came afterward, out of the mood afterward. Because I noticed my beta readers for this one were all sending me texts of things like, this is remarkably cheery for a Kate Quinn book. Like there's hardly any like yeah, you start with a corpse, but other than that, you know, it's like the body count is lower this time and hardly any massacring. And I was just like, yeah, gee, thanks. I mean, it's, I guess I was in a slightly cheerier mood, or at least I was in a more hopeful mood going into writing it. I have no idea, but I don't know. Do you think you have a post-pandemic book or a pandemic book that happened?
For me, there was definitely an element of that, and I actually pulled away from it slightly in the second and third and fourth drafts. There was left fewer references to that experience, but it is a book about loneliness and solitude and the difference between the two. And Marnie, in particular, has kind of lost the habit of friendship, has become incredibly self-conscious about the way she speaks and behaves, and even what her face is doing, in that way that we all did when we re-encountered our friends. And she's found a way to make her life, her solitary life, very, very comfortable. I didn't want it to be a book that treats solitude as a sort of horror story. I wanted it in many ways, particularly through the character of Marnie, to show someone who actually has found a way to live largely by herself, and certainly without a romantic relationship, and to be quite content within that. And at the same time, the book is also a celebration of conversation and connection. So it's about overcoming that self-consciousness, learning to be honest and open, and to take pleasure in the company of other people rather than closing the door and turning inwards and getting by on little treats and indulgences. It's about being out in the world. A big influence for this book was Room with a View, which is a novel that's all about the inside and the outside, and how a landscape can change us and transform us, and how connection with other people changes and transforms us. So that's very much the theme of the book. It's about an interior world in this epic exterior landscape.
I think in a much darker way, my book was a sort of post-pandemic book, in the sense that it was about, you know, we saw a lot of this sort of kind of second homeowners in the UK kind of going down to their second home in the countryside as soon as the pandemic hit, you know, people leaving London, and this sense of kind of us and them. And I think this sort of hostility in rural areas about this sort of influx of people who are kind of potentially bringing the plague with them, as it were. And so I think that really kind of brought hostilities that were probably already kind of bubbling away to a head in some ways. And so I sort of wanted to explore that. And I think there is also this sort of post-pandemic thing of kind of people who hadn't, I mean, it's wonderful, people who hadn't previously discovered the countryside, discovering it. But I think you also, in a sort of the sort of darkened version of that, is you have very kind of moneyed, wealthy people coming from the city, sort of wanting the countryside experience, but wanting it in a sort of quite curated, sort of sanitized way. They want very clean pigs, and they want sort of nice hunter wellies, and they want to go and collect fresh eggs in the morning, but they don't want the kind of smells drifting over from, you know, the cows down the road. And I've got a farm actually right next to the hotel, and when the breeze is blowing in the wrong direction, you can basically just smell manure, and so obviously the hotel would love to do something about that. So yeah, I think sort of playing on those tensions in an evil way, but also you know, it was great fun. I think at the sort of, because I think the beginning of writing the book was still sort of during the end of the pandemic, sort of imagining staying in a lovely, luxurious place where you could sort of have a breakfast buffet and no one would worry about anyone coughing over the croissant. So yeah.
I think it's been so interesting watching the books that have come out that people have written during the pandemic. Because my kids were 4 and 7 when the pandemic started, and my husband has like a real job, and so I became like Zoom school orchestrator. So I was constantly just like scrolling OnlyFans while supervising Zoom kindergarten, you know. But I think some people went with their pandemic novel and wanted to explore the pandemic and wanted to like write about it, or you see it come out in isolation. Or I think for me, I mean, in a weird way, having an infant is kind of like being on lockdown. And so there were ways in which like writing Margot and that first period of young motherhood is so much about like being stuck in your apartment and just being alone. And so in some ways it makes sense that I wrote that during the pandemic, but I think it was also just an escape, you know, like it was, I wanted to create a fun little world that I could go be in the hours that I could, like, I would wake up at like 5 before my kids woke up and write for a couple hours every morning. And so I wanted to create a world that I wanted to go to, you know? And so I think in that way, it's very much a pandemic novel for me.
I love that. Thank you all. We have another question for everybody from our friend Jennifer. She says, how much plotting goes into your books? And whoever feels moved can start with that one.
I'm going to go because I've decided with this book, which is my 8th book, that I'm going to, and I decide this with every book, this time I'm going to sit down and plot the whole thing out before I actually start writing. And I say that every time. And every time I plot kind of about a third of it. And then I just can't bear it any longer. And I get too bored and I just have to start writing and kind of plot as I go along. And then I obviously create all sorts of problems for myself as I go along that I have to solve with the sort of multiple drafts that I do subsequently. But I don't know. I think there is something in a kind of mixture of the two. I think I need a sort of vague roadmap at the beginning, but then I think that has to be for me a sort of jumping off point, because if I followed the plot exactly, I think it would be too paint by numbers and it wouldn't feel alive, it wouldn't feel fun. And I think you need to leave room as the writer. Personally, I think you need to leave room for the things that surprise you along the way. And actually, with all of the murder mysteries I've written, I think the murderer has changed halfway through the writing. And so, that's been such fun. That's been like a real surprise. It has sort of thrown things out slightly in terms of the plotting, and it sort of worried me at the time. But actually, I think if it surprises me, then hopefully it's going to surprise the reader as well. So there we go.
I mean, for me, just to jump in, I had a very literal map to write to. You know, I like the idea of writing a novel where you could read the chapter and then do the walk, and it would correspond, and you'd actually, this is my English edition, but every chapter starts with, not every section starts with the actual route. And so you could really act out this book as you do the walk. It's very specific to the landscape. And within that structure, I love structures like that. They help, because I used to be a screenwriter, and a lot of screenwriting is about structure. It's about where you put the boxes, not what you fill them in with. And knowing that there was this very specific schedule that the plot had to correspond to meant that I could then have fun filling in, working out exactly what happens on that day, what happens by the lake, what happens on the mountain, what happens when the rain comes, and fit the story to the world in a very, very specific way. So it's really 10 units of action, and each of which corresponds to a different stage in their relationship. And within that's when you have fun and you improvise. There's an awful lot of dialogue. So I know where they have to be and where they have to get to, and roughly what the weather is going to be like. And within that, I'm riffing and playing and working out how they bounce off each other and what they say to each other.
I did a lot of plotting for this one just because it was, like 8 viewpoints, and each one a little differently for me. Each one is sequential. You bounce from one viewpoint to the next. Mae Binchy does it a lot in her books, and I was sort of reading those as a template for how to do it well. But it had to be plotted out because I needed to figure out, and this book covers about 4 years. So each section covers a different bit of time, and whose section is most benefited by being early or being late, what events historically are going to, fall during each person's section, and what, pivotal events or pivotal themes from the 1950s for the BRIAR Club did I want to cover, and how can I wind them up in each story. So each one did have to be pretty well plotted out. I needed to know how much time it covered, what thematically it was covering. I tried to do a thing where each section had a major holiday, so there was a thematic in there, something in there, and I also put recipes in because it's all around a supper club, so there's recipes, and it's like I was working out what those would be, and so that had to be plotted out in order for me to make this work. I try to plot more really with every book that I do. I'm convinced at some point it will save me work along the line, and I will stop doing this thing where I massively overwrite my first draft, and I end up at the end of it with this, 200,000 word behemoth, and I am faced with, oh, right, you now have to cut 50,000 words out of this manuscript, and that is never a fun edit. So I have an idea that, maybe if I plot enough, I won't do that. I'll let you know how that goes. It has not happened yet, but I think it will. I think it will someday. Hope springs eternal.
I had to do that cut with Margot's Got Money Troubles. It was at like 150,000 words, and then now it's 93. And so you have absolutely it's so hard. It's so hard doing cuts like that.
Have you done that thing? Have you done that thing where it's like you're doing that kind of prune of your own text where it's like you find the sentences where it says like she turned her head, and you say you cut it to she turned, and you're fist pumping because you cut 2 words?
Oh yeah.
50%, yeah.
And it is remarkable. I feel like it changed my brain having to do that. And on the new project I'm working on, I feel almost like constipated. Like I'm like, that's too many words. You're using too many words. And like I keep trying to like squeeze everything shorter. But no, I also resonated so much with what Lucy was saying in terms of you kind of have to get into hot water yourself. Like I feel like the reader can tell when you have it all secretly already planned out. And so some amount of the trouble your characters get into, you have to not quite know how they're going to get out of it in order for it to feel real to the reader on the page. I always feel like I have to kind of write act 1 and then figure out the plot for the rest of the book. Like I have a gist of what the book is about. I have the gesture of the plot for sure. But then I have to find the characters and really get to know everybody and do kind of a lot of exploratory writing. And then once I have like act 1, then I feel like I can reasonably try and actually plot and go from there. But I also feel like as a writer, plot is it's kind of the thing that I got into storytelling for, because I didn't understand how it worked at all. And just like causation was not natural to me. Getting events to be causally linked to each other seemed like a magic trick to me every time. And so it still kind of does. Like I feel like it is so elemental and so simple, and it still just blows me away. It's like it's such a magic trick, stories.
It's so interesting. We're listening to you all talk about your process, and at the same time, there are so many questions about your process. And we're like, well, they're kind of answering these questions as in their crosstalk, which is really wonderful. I mean, I could just sit here and listen to the 4 of you talk to each other, because your conversation is so enlightening and informative, and you're answering the questions literally that people are asking, like, how did you get started? Or what does your writing work day look like? Asks Kathy Lantrip. Do you have a certain time frame and word count you strive to hit? I mean, we can talk about any of that. Kate kind of touched on it, but it's really wonderful that it's just organically a topic that you all are talking about, because it's really, I mean, it's what you do.
I think it's a bit of a mystery even to us what we do. I mean, you try to figure out ways to make it more efficient, but it doesn't always work. And it won't always work also for each book. I remember I was, venting with some friends at one point, and because I was doing the mid-book moan that I always end up doing, where I end up saying, why do I not know how to write a book? How many books have I written? Why isn't this easier now? And it was, I think, the lovely Sue Meissner who told me she had, for one thing, exactly the same reaction. And every writer I know has this reaction. You hit the point where you're like, why don't I know how to write a book? Why have I not picked this skill up, 10 books in? But she said something like, the thing is, I used to think it would be like being an Olympic swimmer. It would be hard to start when you're starting the training, but once you get there, it's like you can do it. You could just keep doing it. But she said, the thing is, though, that I didn't realize is that for a swimmer, it's always the same lap of water. And for a writer, every book is not the same lap of water. It's a different book. It's a different swim, which is the reason why because I don't know about you, but I always tend to try to challenge myself with everything new. It's like, why did I decide it was a good idea to do 8 points of view? I don't know. It seemed like a good idea at the time, but it's like you keep challenging yourself to do something a little different with each one. And then hence you're never swimming a lane of water that you have ever swum before.
True. I think Lainey, you had a question.
Yes, there was one about movies, and I think that it could be kind of a fun question. Kathleen Milliard said, "Do you see your books as movies, or maybe that's not on your radar when you're writing?" And I don't know. I'll leave that open-ended.
Oh, great question. I think I'm hugely inspired by movies when I'm writing. I watch everything I can, especially with two small people. It's harder to kind of catch everything, but probably my happiest place as a human being is in the cinema on my own, ideally with a glass of wine as a popcorn. I do write quite I think quite cinematically. I can sort of see it as though it were happening on a screen before me. But certainly when I was thinking about the films that had inspired this book, I kind of keep thinking of more that sort of The Birds, The Wicker Man, all sorts of kind of folk horror, weird and wonderful films that I went into, sort of niche 70s British films. The film of Rebecca, gosh, so many that sort of fed into the writing of it. But yeah, I mean, it's the dream for me to see one of the books one day on a screen. Would be great fun. Such a kind of fan of the big screen and the little screen, both screens.
I try not to. I'm very aware, writing screenplays as well. I'm very aware of what you can do in a book that you can't do on the screen. You access to an inner life, access to memory, access to lots of different points of view, whereas on screen you tend to be, it's certainly in cinema, following a protagonist, metaphor and simile and interior monologue and all of these things that don't really exist in film language that I really, really try and make the most of. So a lot of You Are Here is about the difference between what we say and what we really mean, and you have this ability to follow up a conversation with how the characters have viewed the conversation, what they really meant to say, what they should have said, and what the truth is. There's a lot of memory in the novel, a lot of people telling stories, which is a hard thing to do on screen because people can only talk for a certain amount of time before it needs to become a conversation on screen. So I'm very aware of taking full advantage of all the stuff that I can do on the page, where there's no budget, there's no running time, there's the different sense of genre, but at the same time, I'm deeply influenced by movies. I like Lucy. I love the screen. I love writing dialogue. It's my favorite thing. I tend to think in terms of acts and scenes and set pieces because that was my training as a screenwriter. And there's a lot of cinema influences in these books that I talked about. Room with a View, both the book and the film, and there's a lot of Before Sunrise in this book, in the sense that it's two people talking and getting to know each other and finding things out. So yeah, I never want to write a book that feels like it should be a screenplay. At the same time, I'm aware of screenwriting influences coming onto the page.
That makes a ton of sense to me. I think that the thing that I am such a nerd and so in love with what novels can do, and so I think that I think it continually, as I've been having conversations with people like optioning and trying to take my books and turn them into movies or turn them into shows, what I'm aware of most is how absolutely ignorant I am about movies and TV and how you can take advantage of what they can do differently that a novel can't do, and how you sort of make those different decisions. And also just like, as Lucy said, I have little kids. Like I've been living in the land of Caillou. I haven't watched, I'm lucky if I watch like 2 really good movies a year, and so all these conversations are like, and what about so and so for casting? And I'm like, I don't know who that is. I'm gonna have to Google. I'm gonna have to look up all this. I have no idea what's cool. I have no idea who's a good actor. I'm the worst. And because I spend all my leisure time I spend reading, you know. But what about you, Kate?
It is something I was told at one point that I think theatrically, and I think that came from the music training, because I did do a lot of that. And I think like I remember a Broadway friend of mine said something like, the moment when, you know, your character does this, it feels like a moment if it was a musical where she bursts into song and this is her big I want number. And I was like, oh, you might be right about that. Who knows? You know, so I do think these things seep in. I mean, theater seeps in, and I love movies and TV as well. And I love how complicated good TV has gotten these days. The way that storytelling is so intricate and braided, and like there's really creative thing being done with narratives and time splits. And so I watch it to learn as much as anything else, because I'm always looking at something saying, could I do this in a book? No, probably not. But could I do something like this? You know, maybe. And you are very aware of when there are things that a movie can do, or, you know, that can be done on screen that can't be done on a page. I remember thinking when I was writing about, you know, like code breaking, I was just like, you know, it would be so easy to make this really exciting in a movie, because there would be a soundtrack right now that is ramping the tension up as the women are like scribbling over the little sheets of paper. And there would be like cuts to destroyers charging through the ocean, and like the real world unfolding in real time. But on the page, you can't do that. So I'm like, how the hell do I make something dramatic and moving when I don't have a soundtrack and I don't have the option of cutting visually to a battle unfolding in real time, a montage, you know? So it's like, you end up trying to think about it, like you can't do those things. But as you know, David said, there are things that you could do on the page that you cannot do in a more visual medium. And that is a great gift, and you try to lean into that when you're writing a book. So I end up thinking also, but since they are so different, you know, I've had optioning questions for like 3 of my books, and you know, they're all in various stages. Nothing is too far along. So I'd never have any like casting news or anything exciting, like, you know, here I am on the set, you know, filming. I've never been able to do that, fingers crossed. But it's still one of those things where it's like the forms are so different that I've always been aware that if anything of mine ever does make it to some kind of screen, there's no such thing as an absolutely faithful page to screen adaptation, just because the two mediums are so different. That is just literally impossible. So I've always understood if anything does make it to the screen, it's probably going to be quite different in terms of a version of whatever story I wrote to whatever story appears on the screen. And I'm honestly okay with that. It would be kind of cool to see what can people do when they're using the bag of tricks that belongs to a screen instead of a page.
Yeah, I'm all for the unfaithful adaptation. I think it's more interesting. It's more interesting to be like, okay, I'm going to make a piece of art inspired by this piece of art, as opposed to like, I'm going to copy this in film form. Like, it needs to be allowed to change, I think.
Yeah.
I love that. So our final question, which we've ended on before, and I think it is always great for, you know, lifting everyone up in a specific way, but also adding to people's TBR list. But what is one book everybody loves? And that's a really big question. So I'm sorry in a little bit in advance, but doesn't have to be your favorite one, just one you love, maybe what you're reading.
I was talking about some books I love today, and one that came up and I was reminded what a masterpiece it is Housekeeping by Marilyn Robinson, which I think is the most beautiful prose I've ever read. An exquisite novel, very touching, just always moves me. I've read it 3 or 4 times, and it's so rich and emotional, and yet so restrained in its language and precise in its language. I think that's an exquisite book that I'm sure I'll go back to all my life.
I feel like I should have a better answer for this, but all I can think of is Independent People by, I think his name is Halldór Laxness, that Icelandic book. And you have to get through a lot of sick sheep. Like, you have to just make peace with how much you're going to learn about sheep. But there are scenes in that book that I will remember until I die, like they happened to me, because they have that luminous strangeness. And it's a really bewitching book. And I think it's related to how boring certain sections of it are. So if you find yourself bored, you're just like, oh, it's working. Like that's how it's like getting numbed with some sort of anesthetic so that then you can endure some sort of like spiritual surgery that happens later. So just keep going through all of the sheep parasite stuff and and have faith in the journey, I would say.
Oh, that sounds great. I have just started reading and I've never read before, and I feel like it's one of those books that you should have read. The Bonfire of the Vanities. And I can't believe I haven't read it before because it's so me and I love it, and it's utterly brilliant. And I'm not going to say anything profound about it that hasn't been said before. And it's way too late here for me to come up with anything eloquent anyway. But I'm just having such fun with it, and I can already tell, I'm going to read it again. But it's also it's just really nice to not be so in the middle of writing something that I don't have time to read just a really big book. And I'm just loving it. So there we go.
I always go back to any book by Judith Merkel Riley, who was one of my, and remains one of my absolute idols, because it's that eureka moment that you have when you find the kind of stuff that you realize you want to write yourself. And this was the historical fiction that I read, where it was dense, deep, wonderfully realized world building of the past. So it didn't matter what era she was conjuring, it was beautifully conjured. I felt like I could smell and taste and hear and drink in everything, and like I could walk through the pages. And it was smart women getting things done, but not being unrealistic to the time in which they lived. And it was quite often they had a lot of adventure, they had a lot of growth, but they were hilariously funny. And it really gave me the clue that historical fiction could be funny, because this could be a very serious genre. Sometimes you take the past very seriously. And she seemed to be one of the ones who wasn't always taking it seriously. She wasn't afraid to make you laugh. And I read all of this and I just thought, yes, this is what I want to do. And that's a wonderful moment when you find that and you think at the same time, this is what I want to do, but I will never do it as well as this person does it. And that's okay, though. It just makes you think, yeah, but I really want to try.
I'm so excited to read your book, Kate. I know that we should go, but I have to tell you that I have gotten addicted to historical cooking videos, watching people cook historically accurate food. And so the idea of like your 1950s recipes in this book, I'm like so excited. I'm amped.
I will say, though, there's a lot of truly strange 1950s cooking out there. And if I had to learn what a red crest salad was, and it involves pickles and like chicken broth suspended in strawberry jello, I'm sorry, I had to read it. Now you get that image too. There's some very weird food out there, and especially in the 1950s. Oh boy.
That's great. I think we got to everybody, didn't we, as far as their books are concerned?
Yeah, I think so. A lot of great comments. But yeah.
Wonderful comments. You can go back and look at them yourselves. One that we wanted to end on was by Janelyn Kocher. I believe that's how you say her name. And she says, thanks for asking my question, which was earlier in the night. And she just said, this event is the highlight of my week. I think I can speak for Lainey and Grace when I say it's the highlight of our week too. We were really looking forward to hearing from all of you tonight, because your books are so wonderful. You're so wonderful. We've met some of you before, and it's an honor to have this time to have you all together to talk about your books. And I think we so appreciate you. Can we show the jackets one more time? We do want to mention that the David Nicholls jacket is not the final jacket. That's the UK jacket, and there's going to be a reveal of David's US jacket. That's not it, but David says it's pretty nifty, so we're looking forward to seeing it. So
that's true.
Yeah. So You Are Here is going on sale in May 28th. Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley, June 18th. BRIAR Club by Kate Quinn is on July 9th. And Margot's Got Money Troubles by Rufi Thorpe is going on sale June 11th. And we thank you all so much for tonight and for staying up so late, some of you. And if there's anything else that you want to say before we sign off, we just have two quick slides after you say what you need to say. But if there's anything, now is the time.
Thank you just so much for having us and for, giving us a chance to talk to librarians everywhere, because librarians are awesome.
Librarians are indeed the very best people. And I'm just so grateful. I love all the social media content that you guys make. I just you guys are so playful and so fun. And I just think it's so cool that you organize events like this. And I'm honored to be here.
Yes, me too. Thank you. I'm off to a nightclub now, but it's been very exciting to stay up so late and meet you all and hear about your fantastic book. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I discovered my love of reading through libraries, and now that's a joy I'm sharing with my 2 young sons. So feels very special. Thank you. And I'm not off to a nightclub. I am wearing my pajamas beneath the screen. I'm just going to admit that on screen. There we go. Thank you all. It was such fun hearing about everyone's books. Really enjoyed it, and I've got 3 new books at the top of my TBR now. So
Well, listen, I just think we're all members of the pajama wearing club from the waist down, and we're all just going to admit it. You did before we went on screen, and now you just, the truth is out, and the books will be out, and download them now. Librarians, read them, love them, tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell your patrons, and thank you all again. Lainey, Grace, do you want to do 2 quick slides of forthcoming stuff?
Yeah, our next episode of Galley Gab Fest is Out of This World. We're discussing sci-fi fantasy titles, and I have not gotten tired of saying that tagline, so everyone's welcome for hearing it again. We have the VP Editorial Director of Harper Voyager, David Pomerico, joining us, and you're not gonna want to miss that. March 13th, next Wednesday, 2 p.m. And our next slide, Lainey.
Don't worry, Grace. We all love a pun, so bring them on. Just quickly before we log off, we're so happy that you're here. And I know we were on Facebook tonight. We are continuing to work from our other Crowdcast back end. So as we make these changes, let us know what we've done. It's been about a year, so we're trying things out. Take a quick survey and let us know if you're loving it. And that's all we have for housekeeping.
All right. Well, the Library Love Fest marketing team, Lainey, Grace, and myself, we so appreciate you all watching tonight. And David, Rufi, Lucy, and Kate, thank you again so much for tonight. Take good care, all, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, all.